Only 1% of humans can still access what scientists are quietly calling our sixth sense, not some mystical ability, but an actual biological communication system hardwired into your DNA. This isn't spiritual fantasy. It's dormant genetic technology that once allowed our ancestors to decode the constant stream of information flowing through nature. Right now, trees around you are transmitting chemical signals, electromagnetic frequencies, and vibrational data that indigenous cultures could naturally interpret. Ancient figures like Thoth understood this biological potential, documenting how humans could literally hear environmental intelligence. But modern conditioning has systematically detuned these natural receivers, like a radio forced onto static. The Egyptian texts weren't mythology, they were biological manuals. Your nervous system still contains the hardware, it's just been switched off through generations of disconnect from natural environments. Once you understand how to reactivate these dormant pathways, your perception shifts permanently. You'll never feel alone again, because you'll become aware of the intricate communication network that surrounds you every moment. If you've ever felt an inexplicable connection with nature, comment, "I am part of nature," below. The secret to communicating with nature isn't hidden in some New Age crystal shop or buried in expensive courses taught by modern gurus. It's been sitting right in front of us for over 4,000 years, carved into stone tablets and temple walls across ancient Egypt. But here's what nobody tells you. The Egyptians weren't just building monuments to dead pharaohs. They were encoding the most sophisticated understanding of consciousness and natural communication that humanity has ever possessed. Let me introduce you to Thoth, the ibis-headed deity who served as the scribe of the universe itself. While most people dismiss him as mythology, the ancient Egyptians understood Thoth as the keeper of cosmic knowledge, the being who recorded every thought, every natural law, every secret of how consciousness interacts with the physical world. When the Greeks later encountered these teachings, they called him Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, and his wisdom became the foundation of Hermetic philosophy that would influence Western esoteric traditions for millennia. But here's where it gets fascinating. Thoth left us something extraordinary, a text called the Emerald Tablet. Most scholars treat it like ancient poetry, full of mystical metaphors that sound profound but mean nothing practical. They've got it completely backwards. This isn't poetry, it's an instruction manual. The most famous line from the Emerald Tablet reads, "As above, so below. As below, so above." For thousands of years, people have quoted this phrase without understanding what Thoth was actually telling us. He wasn't speaking in riddles. He was describing the fundamental architecture of reality itself, how the patterns of cosmic consciousness mirror the patterns of earthly life, and how understanding this connection gives us the key to communicate across different levels of existence. Now, if you want to see this principle in action, walk outside and look at any tree. Really, look at it. What you're seeing is the most perfect physical demonstration of as above, so below that exists on this planet. The root system extends deep into the Earth's darkness, spreading in intricate networks that mirror exactly, and I mean exactly, the pattern of branches reaching upward toward the cosmic light. The trunk serves as the bridge, the conductor that connects these two worlds. But Thoth understood something that modern science is just beginning to rediscover. Trees aren't just pretty examples of natural symmetry. They're living antennas. They're energy conductors that literally connect terrestrial power with cosmic information. Every tree is a biological interface between the consciousness of the Earth and the intelligence of the cosmos. Think about this for a moment. A tree's roots don't just absorb water and nutrients. They're plugged directly into the planet's electrical field. The same electromagnetic energy that drives our weather systems, influences animal migration patterns, and affects human consciousness in ways we're only beginning to understand. Meanwhile, those branches and leaves aren't just collecting sunlight for photosynthesis. They're receiving and processing electromagnetic information from solar radiation, cosmic rays, and the entire spectrum of energy that bathes our planet from space. The trunk, that's where the magic happens. It's not just wood. It's a living transmission system that processes, translates, and integrates information flowing between these two realms. When you understand this, you begin to realize why Thoth chose the tree as the perfect symbol for consciousness communication. Trees literally embody the Hermetic principle. They are the as above, so below, made manifest in living form. This is why ancient cultures around the world, not just Egypt, but Celtic druids, indigenous shamans, Buddhist monks, all recognized trees as sacred communication portals. They weren't being primitive or superstitious. They were recognizing something that our modern technological society has forgotten. Trees are the planet's original internet, a biological network that connects Earth consciousness with cosmic intelligence. Now, some of Thoth's most powerful techniques for accessing this network are too sensitive to share publicly on a platform like YouTube, where anyone can access them without proper preparation or understanding. But I do share these advanced methods exclusively through our free Insights Academy newsletter, where serious students can learn these practices safely and effectively. And right now, subscribers also receive a complimentary copy of The Kybalion, which contains the most complete surviving collection of Hermetic principles, but only for a limited time. What I can tell you here is that what follows in our next section isn't going to involve any ceremonial theater with robes and candles. You won't need special tools or expensive equipment. What we're going to explore is a precise internal realignment technique that works with the same biological and electromagnetic principles that modern forest ecology research is now validating through peer-reviewed scientific studies. You see, cutting-edge scientists are discovering that forests operate as unified consciousness networks. They're finding that trees communicate through underground fungal networks that share resources, information, and even warnings about environmental threats. They're measuring electromagnetic signatures that indicate trees respond to human presence and emotional states. They're documenting how forest environments can alter human brainwave patterns, reduce stress hormones, and enhance cognitive function in ways that suggest genuine two-way communication is occurring. The ancient wisdom and modern science are converging on the same truth. Forests aren't just collections of individual trees. They're conscious networks, living systems of intelligence that we can learn to interface with directly. And the key to that interface lies in understanding how our own consciousness mirrors the same as above, so below principle that governs every tree in the forest. Your thoughts and emotions create electromagnetic patterns that extend beyond your physical body. Your nervous system operates on the same basic electrical principles that govern plant communication networks. Your consciousness has the same capacity to bridge different levels of reality that makes trees such perfect cosmic antennas. Thoth understood this connection 4,000 years ago. He encoded it in stone and symbol, preserving it for the day when humanity would be ready to reclaim this lost technology of consciousness. That day isn't coming. It's here. And in our next section, we're going to explore exactly how modern forest ecology research is proving that everything the ancient Egyptians knew about nature communication was absolutely scientifically accurate. What the ancients called the forest spirit now has a scientific name that should sound remarkably familiar to anyone living in our digital age. Scientists call it the Wood Wide Web. And no, that's not some clever modern nickname. The resemblance to our internet isn't coincidental. It reflects something profound that researchers are only beginning to understand. The biological communication networks that have existed beneath our feet for hundreds of millions of years operate with a sophistication that makes our most advanced technology look primitive by comparison. For decades, we've been taught that forests are basically collections of individual trees competing against each other for sunlight, water, and nutrients. It's the botanical version of survival of the fittest, every tree for itself in some kind of green gladiator arena. But here's what's fascinating. This entire framework was wrong. Dead wrong. The person who proved this wasn't working in some sterile laboratory. Forest ecologist Suzanne Simard spent over 3 decades crawling through the forests of British Columbia, getting her hands dirty, mapping something that revolutionized our understanding of how nature actually works. What she discovered reads like science fiction, except it's been happening under our noses this entire time. Simard's research revealed that forests aren't collections of competing individuals at all. They're integrated superorganisms operating through collective intelligence. Think about that for a moment. When you walk through a forest, you're not looking at thousands of separate trees. You're looking at a single, unified intelligence that's been thinking, communicating, and making decisions as one entity for potentially thousands of years. The unified intelligence infrastructure making this possible exists in microscopic fungal filaments called mycelia. These thread-like structures interweave with tree roots, creating what can only be described as biological internet cables more sophisticated than anything humans have engineered. A single handful of forest soil contains literally miles of these fungal networks. They're everywhere, connecting everything, facilitating a constant flow of information and resources between trees that can be miles apart. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just some random biological plumbing system. The communication happening through these networks shows clear signs of intelligence and intentional decision-making. Simard discovered that the oldest, strongest trees in the forest, she calls them mother trees, actively send essential nutrients like carbon and nitrogen to struggling seedlings through the fungal networks. This isn't random distribution. It's intelligent resource allocation designed to ensure the survival of the forest community as a whole. Even more remarkable, these mother trees can distinguish between their own offspring and unrelated seedlings, sending more resources to their genetic children while still supporting the broader forest community. They're literally nurturing the next generation, making strategic decisions about resource allocation that benefit both their genetic legacy and the forest ecosystem as a whole. The communication gets even more sophisticated when you look at the forest's defense systems. When one tree detects a pest attack, say, a swarm of bark beetles, it doesn't just suffer in silence. It immediately releases chemical distress signals through the mycorrhizal network, warning its neighbors about the incoming threat. The neighboring trees receive these chemical messages and immediately begin producing defensive compounds in their leaves, essentially preparing for battle before the pests even arrive. This is collective defense strategy, operating at a level that proves forest consciousness works as a unified intelligent organism. Individual trees sacrifice their own resources to warn the community, and the community responds by preparing coordinated defenses. It's like having a biological early warning system that's been operating flawlessly for millions of years. Recent discoveries have added another layer to this communication network that's almost hard to believe. Researchers have found that trees emit ultrasonic clicks when they're stressed by drought or physical damage. These aren't random noises. They're structured information transmissions occurring at frequencies beyond human hearing range. Scientists can now record these sounds and analyze their patterns, revealing what can only be described as sophisticated plant language systems. Trees experiencing drought stress produce different acoustic signatures than trees dealing with physical damage. They're literally talking to each other through sound, sharing information about their condition and needs. The forest is constantly chattering away in frequencies we never knew existed, coordinating responses to environmental challenges through multiple communication channels simultaneously. Now, here's where this connects back to what we discussed about human intuitive abilities. Our ancestors lived in intimate contact with these forest communication networks for hundreds of thousands of years. They didn't have the scientific vocabulary to explain what they were sensing, but their nervous systems were constantly receiving information from these biological networks. They called it forest spirit, but they were actually tuning into real, measurable communication systems. Modern urban living and the electromagnetic pollution from our technology has essentially jammed our biological receivers. We're surrounded by radio waves, cell phone signals, and electronic noise that drowns out the subtle frequencies our ancestors navigated by. But the capacity to sense these natural communication networks remains dormant in our DNA, waiting for reactivation. The techniques we'll explore later in this series are designed to help you clear that interference and reconnect with communication channels that have been operating successfully for millions of years. What science is proving is that the mystical connection between humans and nature isn't mystical at all. It's biological hardware that we've simply forgotten how to use. The Wood Wide Web isn't just changing how we understand forests. It's changing how we understand consciousness, intelligence, and our place in the natural world. We're not separate from nature's communication networks. We're part of them. And it's time we remembered how to plug back in. Now that we understand the scientific reality of the Wood Wide Web, here's what every spiritualist needs to grasp. Accessing this network isn't like connecting to Wi-Fi. There's no password you can type in, no subscription fee, no customer service number to call when the connection fails. Forest consciousness operates on an entirely different protocol, one based on vibrational frequency and demonstrated intention. Think about it this way. You're attempting to connect with a collective intelligence that has survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and countless human civilizations. This isn't some naive, trusting system that grants access to anyone who shows up with good intentions scribbled on a sticky note. The forest is ancient, wise, and incredibly discerning about who gains entry to its communication channels. It responds not to force, arrogance, or the typical human approach of, "I want it now." Instead, it responds to respect, humility, and what I call genuine presence, a quality that most of us have forgotten how to embody in our hyper-connected, always rushing world. This is why the first step isn't some complex ritual involving crystals, sage, or chanting in languages you don't understand. It's actually much simpler and, paradoxically, much more challenging for modern minds to execute properly. The approach protocol begins before you even set foot in the forest. Stop at the forest edge. I mean literally, stop walking. Don't rush in like you're entering a shopping mall or hiking trail. This pause isn't ceremonial theater, it's practical frequency calibration. Feel the environmental shift happening around you. Notice how the air temperature drops slightly as you move from open space into the forest's microclimate. Pay attention to the humidity change, that subtle thickness that tells you there's more water cycling through the air here, more life breathing and transpiring. Listen to how the acoustic landscape transforms. The harsh edges of human-made sounds soften, traffic noise gets filtered and absorbed, bird calls become more prominent. Even the quality of silence changes. This isn't just pleasant nature observation. You're literally allowing your nervous system to downshift from the hypervigilant state required for navigating human environments to the more receptive state necessary for detecting subtler forms of communication. Then comes what I call the 3 cleansing breaths, and no, this isn't borrowed from yoga class. Each exhale needs to release specific types of mental noise that keep consciousness locked in survival mode rather than receptive awareness. First breath, release the rush. That internal speedometer that's constantly pushing you to move faster, accomplish more, get to the next thing. The forest operates on geological time. Trees communicate in conversations that can span days or weeks. Rushing energy is like shouting in a library. It immediately marks you as disruptive. Second breath, release the worries. All those mental loops about what you need to do later, what went wrong yesterday, what might happen tomorrow. These anxiety patterns create electromagnetic static that interferes with the subtle bioelectric communications happening all around you. Third breath, release the endless to-do lists, that mental inventory of tasks, obligations, and responsibilities that keeps your consciousness fragmented across dozens of different concerns. To receive forest communication, you need unified attention, not scattered awareness. Now comes the verbal or silent declaration. And this isn't mere politeness. I come in peace. I have not come to take anything. I have come to listen and learn. This statement is frequency calibration. You're shifting from consumer mentality, the default human approach of extracting value from nature, to guest consciousness. Think about the difference in your energy when you're shopping versus when you're visiting someone's home as an honored guest. That shift in internal orientation is exactly what this declaration creates. The forest can sense the difference. Remember, these trees have been dealing with humans for millennia. They know the energetic signature of someone who's come to take, whether it's wood, plants, or even just Instagram photos for social media validation. They also recognize the much rarer frequency of someone who's genuinely come to receive wisdom. Once you've completed this approach protocol, you begin what I call intuitive walking. Move slowly, without predetermined destination. This isn't random wandering. You're learning to recognize the forest's invitation system. Here's what most people miss. Certain trees will create an inexplicable magnetic pull for specific individuals at particular moments. It's not imagination or wishful thinking. It's the forest's intelligence responding to your respectful approach and actively guiding you toward the most beneficial connection point for your unique situation and timing. Different trees offer different types of communication and wisdom. Ancient oaks, with their massive root systems and centuries of experience, provide stability and grounding. They're excellent teachers for anyone dealing with major life transitions or feeling unmoored from their purpose. Willows, with their flexible branches and affinity for water, offer emotional healing and help processing grief or trauma. Pines share resilience and endurance. They're powerful allies for anyone facing long-term challenges or needing to develop patience. The forest intelligently matches each person with their optimal tree teacher. A stressed executive might find themselves drawn to a massive, calm oak. Someone processing heartbreak might feel pulled toward a graceful willow. A person struggling with addiction or difficult life circumstances often discovers themselves standing before a pine that survived lightning strikes, storms, and decades of harsh conditions yet continues growing. This initial selection process is already communication happening. The forest has assessed your energy, your current needs, your capacity for receiving information, and your genuine level of respect. It's responding by creating subtle guidance toward the tree that can offer exactly what you need to learn at this moment in your life. Pay attention to that inexplicable pull toward a particular tree. It's not coincidence, it's invitation. The Wood Wide Web has already begun analyzing your bioelectric field and matching you with the most compatible communication partner in this vast network of ancient wisdom. What happens next is where the real magic begins, and it's nothing like what most spiritual books will tell you about tree communication. Now comes the moment you've been preparing for, your first actual conversation with a tree. And I need to be completely honest with you here, this won't look anything like what you've seen in movies. There's no glowing lights, no mystical voices echoing in your head, no dramatic supernatural phenomena. What you're about to experience is far more subtle, but it's also far more real than any Hollywood special effect. The communication that happens between human consciousness and tree consciousness operates on frequencies so gentle that most people walk right past them every day without noticing. But once you learn to tune into these frequencies, you'll wonder how you ever missed something so obvious. Let's start with your approach. You've chosen your tree, that oak or maple or pine that called to you during your initial forest walk. Now, as you move toward it, I want you to shift your entire mindset. You're not walking up to an object. You're approaching a living being that has been breathing, growing, and surviving in this exact spot for possibly decades or centuries longer than you've been alive. Think about that for a moment. If you're approaching a 100-year-old oak, this tree was already established when your grandparents were children. It has weathered storms that would terrify you, survived droughts that lasted years, and felt the footsteps of countless animals and humans across its lifetime. You're about to introduce yourself to an elder. Treat it with that level of reverence. Walk slowly. Move with intention, not casual familiarity. Let the tree sense your approach rather than surprising it with sudden movement. Yes, trees are aware of approaching beings. Remember that Wood Wide Web we discussed? Your footsteps create vibrations that travel through root networks faster than you're walking. When you reach the tree, place one hand flat against its bark. Not both hands, one hand. This single point of contact is crucial because it creates what I call the primary electrical connection between your biofield and the tree's energy system. Your hand becomes both a transmitter and a receiver, conducting the subtle electrical impulses that carry information between your nervous system and the tree's network. Now, close your eyes and focus entirely on what you're feeling through that hand. Feel every detail of the bark's texture, the rough ridges, the smooth valleys, the places where the bark has been damaged and healed. Notice temperature differences across the surface. Some areas might feel slightly warmer where the tree's circulation is more active. Others might feel cooler where the bark is thicker or where moisture has collected. Pay attention to moisture levels. Is the bark dry and papery? Or can you detect subtle dampness? Feel for any surface irregularities, scars from old wounds, places where branches once grew, areas where the bark has been worn smooth by weather or animals. Each of these details tells part of the tree's survival story, and by focusing on them through direct touch, you're reading the first chapter of its biography. This intense sensory focus serves a critical purpose beyond just gathering information. It pulls your consciousness completely out of mental chatter and anchors your awareness in the present moment, at the exact point where your skin meets the tree's bark. This anchoring is absolutely essential because it shifts your brainwave state from beta, that analytical, thinking mode we spend most of our time in, to alpha, which is a receptive, aware state that's optimal for receiving subtle communication. Here's where things get interesting. As you maintain this focused contact, you might begin to notice responses that weren't there moments before. These can take several different forms, and it's crucial that you don't dismiss any of them as imagination. You might experience sudden emotional shifts, a deep peace washing over you that you weren't feeling before you touched the tree. Or sometimes it's the opposite, an inexplicable sadness, as if you're sensing some struggle or loss the tree has experienced. I've had people report sudden waves of joy that seem to come from nowhere, or a profound sense of ancient wisdom that felt completely foreign to their normal emotional range. Sometimes the response comes as mental images, quick flashes that feel more like recovered memories than new thoughts. You might see the forest as it was decades ago, or glimpse animals that regularly visit this tree, or even get impressions of seasonal changes from the tree's perspective. Physical sensations are common too. Tingling in the hand that's touching the bark, temperature changes that seem to flow up your arm, or even a subtle vibration that feels like the tree's version of a pulse. Some people report feeling like their hand is being gently held, or that there's a warm current flowing between their palm and the bark. But perhaps the most common first response is what I call simple knowing, information that arrives in your consciousness not as thoughts or images, but as if you're remembering something you had forgotten. You might suddenly know that this tree is particularly fond of morning sunlight, or that it's been providing shelter for a family of squirrels, or that it's been stressed by recent construction nearby. This knowing doesn't feel like you're making it up. It feels like you're accessing information that was already there, waiting for you to tune in. Now, here's the critical part. These responses aren't your imagination running wild, and they're not wishful thinking. What you're experiencing is actual information transfer happening through bioelectrical and electromagnetic field interactions between your nervous system and the tree's network. The science we discussed earlier, the electrical signaling, the electromagnetic fields, the documented communication networks, this is how it manifests in direct experience. But the moment you start thinking, this is just my imagination, you've shifted back to analytical beta brainwaves and closed the communication channel. That skeptical dismissal is like hanging up the phone in the middle of a conversation. Instead, approach each response with curious openness. Think of it as the tree testing your receptivity, checking to see if you're genuinely willing to engage in this non-verbal form of communication. This first exchange is like a handshake between two different forms of consciousness. The tree is acknowledging your presence and your intention to communicate, and you're demonstrating that you can receive and recognize its responses. This mutual recognition opens the channel for much deeper levels of communication. Some trees are more immediately responsive than others, just like some humans are more talkative when you first meet them. Don't be discouraged if your first contact feels subtle. The tree is assessing whether you're someone worth investing energy in communicating with. Your job is to show up with genuine respect, maintain that focused contact, and remain open to whatever form the response takes. What you've just experienced is the foundation of all nature communication. You've established that initial electrical connection, demonstrated your ability to shift into receptive awareness, and opened yourself to receiving information through non-verbal channels. This is how the conversation begins, but this is just the handshake. In our next phase, we're going to explore how to deepen this connection into actual synchronized communication by aligning your heart rhythm with the tree's natural frequencies. That's when the real conversation begins, and what you'll discover will fundamentally change how you understand consciousness itself. You felt that first touch, that moment when the tree acknowledged your presence. But what you experienced was just the opening handshake, the polite introduction before the real conversation begins. True communication with trees happens through something far more profound than physical contact. It operates through resonance, the same universal principle that makes tuning forks vibrate in harmony when placed near each other. Here's what most people miss entirely. Trees don't speak in words, sounds, or even the subtle energy shifts you might expect. They communicate through vibrations, electromagnetic pulses, and biorhythmic patterns that your body can detect if you know how to listen with more than just your ears. Your nervous system is already equipped for this kind of communication. Every cell in your body operates on electrical impulses. Your heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in your entire system, extending several feet beyond your physical body. When you learn to feel with your entire nervous system rather than relying on your traditional five senses, you tap into a communication channel that's been available to you since birth. The key lies in synchronization. Just as your heartbeat naturally adjusts when you're close to someone you love, your cardiac rhythm can align with the slower, deeper pulse of a tree's vascular system. This isn't mystical thinking, it's applied biology. Position yourself with one hand maintaining contact with the tree's bark, while placing your other hand over your heart center. This creates what researchers call a biofeedback loop between your cardiac rhythm and the tree's biological oscillations. The physical contact point becomes your anchor, while your heart becomes the tuning mechanism. Start by recognizing your own heartbeat. Feel that familiar rhythm, the same pulse that sustained your life since before you took your first breath. This personal rhythm becomes your baseline frequency, the starting point from which synchronization begins. Most people rush past this step, but it's crucial. You can't harmonize with another living system until you're fully aware of your own biological rhythm. Now comes the fascinating part. Begin sensing the tree's pulse, not through your ears, but through your entire body. Visualize the sap rising slowly from the deep root system, traveling up through the trunk where your hand rests, continuing its journey toward the branches and leaves above. This isn't fantasy or guided imagery. You're attuning yourself to actual biological processes happening within the tree's vascular system at this very moment. The tree's pulse operates on a completely different timescale than your heartbeat. Think of it like the difference between a hummingbird's rapid wing beats and the slow, powerful breathing of a whale. The tree's rhythm is deeper, steadier, more like the Earth's own breathing pattern. Some researchers have measured these biological oscillations in ancient trees and found cycles that span several minutes rather than seconds. Here's the synchronization technique that changes everything. Breathe the tree's energy into your heart center while exhaling your heart energy into the tree. Create a circular flow between both living systems. Inhale slowly, imagining you're drawing up that steady, ancient rhythm from deep within the trunk. Exhale gradually, sending your own life force into the tree's network. Through conscious breathing and focused intention, gradually slow your heart rate to match the tree's deeper pulse. This isn't about forcing your heartbeat to an unhealthy rhythm, it's about finding the natural resonance point where both systems can meet. Your heart rate will naturally slow during deep relaxation anyway. You're simply guiding this process towards synchronization with another living being. When true vibrational alignment occurs, something remarkable happens. Communication transcends your normal sensory channels and becomes direct knowing. Information arrives not as thoughts or words, but as intuitive downloads that feel more like recovered memories than newly received data. The tree doesn't provide external answers to your questions. Instead, it amplifies your own inner wisdom, helping you access knowledge that already exists within your deeper consciousness. Think of it as a biological amplifier and mirror combined, reflecting back your own suppressed insights while providing the stability and clarity needed to integrate them. In this synchronized state, people consistently report sudden clarity about personal problems they've been struggling with for months or years. Emotional tensions that seemed permanently lodged in their bodies suddenly release. Creative insights that felt impossible to access through normal thinking processes flow naturally. This happens because synchronization temporarily quiets the mental chatter that usually drowns out your intuitive faculties. The tree's steady, ancient rhythm acts like a biological metronome, entraining your nervous system into a more coherent state. Your brain waves naturally shift into the alpha and theta frequencies associated with deep insight and emotional healing. The most profound communications often arrive as wordless understanding about your place in the larger web of life. You might suddenly grasp how your personal struggles connect to broader patterns, or receive clear direction about decisions you've been avoiding. These insights feel completely natural, not like mystical revelations, but like remembering something you'd temporarily forgotten. Practice this synchronization technique for at least 10 minutes during each tree encounter. The longer you maintain the synchronized state, the deeper the communication becomes. Some people report that after 20 or 30 minutes, the boundary between their consciousness and the tree's awareness becomes beautifully blurred, creating a shared space of knowing that belongs to both beings simultaneously. This is just the beginning. Once you've mastered heart synchronization with individual trees, you're ready to access something even more extraordinary: the collective intelligence of entire forest networks. When you've mastered heart synchronization with trees, when that vibrational connection becomes second nature, something unexpected happens. The forest stops being polite. It stops showing you only what you want to see. Instead, it becomes the most honest mirror you'll ever encounter, reflecting back every aspect of who you truly are. And I mean everything. This is where most people's journey with nature communication either deepens into profound transformation or comes to an abrupt halt. Because trees, in their ancient wisdom and unshakable stability, don't lie. They don't flatter. They don't tell you what you want to hear. They simply exist in complete authenticity, and their presence naturally calls forth the same from you. Think about your relationships with other humans. Every interaction is colored by judgment, expectation, social conditioning, emotional baggage. We perform roles, hide aspects of ourselves we don't like, project images we think others want to see. But a tree has no agenda. It doesn't care about your job title, your relationship status, or how you present yourself to the world. It sees you, all of you, with complete neutrality. This creates the perfect conditions for what psychologists call shadow work, the process of integrating the rejected, suppressed, or simply forgotten aspects of your personality. When you maintain that vibrational connection we explored in the previous section, when your heart rhythm synchronizes with the tree's deeper frequency, something profound occurs. The barriers between your conscious mind and your unconscious patterns begin to dissolve. Here's how it typically unfolds. You're standing there, breathing with your chosen tree, feeling that sense of connection we've been building toward. Then you notice something about the tree that catches your attention. Maybe it's a branch that grew in an unusual direction, twisting around obstacles to reach a patch of sunlight. And suddenly, without any logical reason, you're thinking about your own stubbornness. How you've been forcing situations in your life, instead of finding creative solutions. How you've been so focused on doing things the right way that you've missed opportunities for growth. The tree didn't tell you this. It simply existed authentically, and your deeper wisdom recognized the parallel. I remember working with a woman who'd been struggling with her relationship to vulnerability. She was successful, strong, fiercely independent, and utterly exhausted from carrying everything alone. During one of her sessions with an old oak, she became fixated on the tree's exposed roots. They'd been revealed by years of soil erosion, twisted and gnarled, looking almost painful in their nakedness. She stood there for nearly an hour, just staring at those roots, tears streaming down her face. Later, she told me she'd never realized how much energy she spent hiding her own vulnerabilities, how terrified she was of letting people see the parts of her that felt twisted or damaged. The tree's exposed roots weren't ugly, they were beautiful in their honesty, still strong, still nourishing the massive trunk above. They showed her that vulnerability and strength aren't opposites. But here's what makes this process so challenging. Trees reflect everything, not just the uncomfortable stuff. They also mirror back the positive qualities you've forgotten or underestimated. That same oak, with its deep roots and spreading canopy, reflected this woman's incredible capacity to nurture others while staying grounded in her own truth. She'd been so focused on her perceived weaknesses that she'd lost sight of her profound strengths. This is why the mirror of nature can be overwhelming. We're conditioned to focus on our problems, our flaws, our limitations. When a tree suddenly reflects back your innate wisdom, your natural resilience, your capacity for growth and adaptation, it can be just as disorienting as confronting your shadow aspects. I've watched people have complete breakthroughs simply by observing how a tree responds to damage. Trees don't heal the way humans do. They don't regenerate lost branches or repair scars. Instead, they compartmentalize damage and grow around it. They turn wounds into wisdom, creating stronger wood around injury sites, producing resin that actually protects against future damage. One man I worked with had been carrying guilt about a business failure for over a decade. He was convinced it defined him as a person. Then, he spent time with a pine tree that had been struck by lightning years earlier. The scar ran down the entire trunk, but the tree had grown stronger wood around the damaged area. New growth spiraled around the old wound, creating a pattern more beautiful than the original bark. He realized he'd been trying to erase his failure instead of learning from it. The tree showed him how to integrate the experience, how to let it become part of his strength rather than his shame. That lightning scar wasn't the tree's weakness, it was proof of its resilience. This is what I mean about trees being perfect therapeutic partners. They don't analyze or interpret, they don't offer advice or judgment. They simply demonstrate, through their very existence, how to live authentically with both light and shadow integrated. But let me be honest with you, this phase of nature communication is where most people quit. It's psychologically easier to blame external circumstances for our problems than to examine our internal contributions. It's more comfortable to maintain familiar patterns than to face the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. The forest won't let you hide forever, though. Once you've opened that vibrational connection, once you've tasted authentic communication with tree consciousness, superficial interactions become impossible. You can't unsee what the trees have shown you about yourself. The key is learning to stay present with whatever arises. When uncomfortable truths surface, breathe through them. When forgotten strengths emerge, receive them with gratitude. The tree isn't judging any of it, it's simply creating space for you to see yourself clearly. This is where the relationship transcends technique and becomes genuine partnership. You're no longer just practicing communication methods or trying to achieve specific outcomes. You're engaging in mutual healing exchange. You offer your presence, your attention, your willingness to grow. The tree provides stability, wisdom, and the unwavering example of how to transform challenges into strength. The most profound part of this process is realizing that the tree has been waiting for this level of authentic connection. Trees are ancient beings who've witnessed countless human dramas, and they recognize genuine seekers. When you stop performing and start simply being, shadow and light integrated, you become someone they can truly communicate with. This mirror phase isn't comfortable, but it's absolutely necessary. Because until you can see yourself clearly, until you can accept both your limitations and your gifts, you're not ready for the deeper levels of nature communication that await. The trees are preparing you, strengthening you, helping you become someone capable of receiving the profound wisdom they're waiting to share. After you've completed the ritual approach, synchronized your heartbeat with the tree's electromagnetic field, and faced the shadows reflected in nature's mirror, you're finally prepared to receive Thoth's most closely guarded secret. What I'm about to share represents the synthesis of everything you've learned, the technique that transforms all previous steps from interesting exercises into genuine creative power. The ancient Egyptian texts speak of Thoth as the scribe of reality itself, the consciousness that writes existence into being through focused thought. But here's what most people miss. Thoth understood a fundamental principle that wouldn't be rediscovered in the West until mystics like Neville Goddard began teaching it in the 20th century. That principle is simple yet revolutionary. Imagination doesn't just create mental pictures. Imagination is the actual mechanism through which consciousness shapes physical reality. When Goddard taught imagination creates reality, he was echoing wisdom that Thoth had encoded in the Egyptian mystery schools thousands of years earlier. But there's a crucial distinction we need to make here. We're not talking about fantasy or wishful thinking. We're talking about imagination as a precise creative tool, the bridge between consciousness and manifestation. Now, within the context of your tree connection, this takes on extraordinary power. Once you've established that vibrational synchrony with the tree's consciousness, you're no longer operating as an isolated individual mind. You're connected to a vast network of forest intelligence that amplifies and directs your creative intentions through the living web of nature itself. Here's how the technique actually works. After achieving heart synchronization and breathing in rhythm with your tree partner, you're going to use imagination in a very specific way. This isn't random daydreaming or casual visualization. This is focused creative projection combined with emotional resonance. And here's the key, you're going to project through feelings, not words. Why feelings instead of words? Because feelings represent the universal vibrational language that transcends all human linguistic limitations. When you project a feeling state, you're communicating in frequencies that every living system can understand and respond to. Trees don't speak English or Spanish or Mandarin, but they absolutely understand the vibrational signature of joy, peace, vitality, or clarity. Let me walk you through this practically. Say you're seeking guidance about a major life decision. Your analytical mind wants to ask verbal questions. What should I do about my career? Should I move to a different city? How do I handle this relationship issue? But verbal questions engage the analytical mind, which actually blocks the intuitive download you're trying to receive. Instead, you're going to generate the feeling of already possessing the answer. Close your eyes and feel what it would be like to have complete clarity about your situation. Feel that sense of certainty, that inner knowing that settles into your bones when you absolutely know the right path forward. Feel the relief that comes with having the confusion lifted. Feel the confidence and peace that accompany making decisions from a place of inner wisdom rather than fear or doubt. Now, while maintaining your synchronized breathing with the tree, project this feeling state directly from your heart center to the tree's heart center through the connection you've established. You're not asking or begging, you're declaring a vibrational truth, that clarity and wisdom are your natural state, and you're using the tree as a powerful resonance antenna to amplify this intention and connect it to the universal intelligence that flows through all living systems. If you're working with healing, The process is similar but even more profound. Rather than focusing on illness or pain, which actually reinforces the vibration of the problem you're trying to solve, you generate the feeling of already being healed. Feel the vitality and energy of perfect health flowing through your body. Feel the joy and freedom that come with being completely well. Feel your cells vibrating with life force, your organs functioning in perfect harmony, your entire system humming with wellness. This isn't denial or positive thinking. This is vibrational programming at the quantum level. You're literally instructing your cellular matrix to reorganize around the frequency of health rather than illness. And when you project this through your tree connection, you're tapping into the regenerative power that allows forests to heal from fires, storms, and disease. That same healing intelligence that's been maintaining life on this planet for millions of years. The crucial element here is maintaining this projection with calm confidence rather than desperate grasping. Desperation carries the vibration of lack, which contradicts the very outcome you're trying to create. Instead, you hold the feeling with the same quiet certainty you'd have about the sun rising tomorrow. You're not hoping it will happen. You're acknowledging what already exists in the quantum field of possibilities and using your focused imagination to collapse that possibility into physical reality. What happens next is where the real magic reveals itself. The answers don't come from outside as whispered voices or mystical signs written in the leaves. Instead, responses arrive as what I can only describe as instant downloads of knowledge. Suddenly, you simply know something with complete cellular conviction. You don't think you know the answer, you know it the same way you know your own name. This represents direct cognition that bypasses your rational thought processes entirely. You're accessing your higher intuitive wisdom, amplified by forest consciousness, and delivered through the vibrational network you've established. It's like having a high-speed internet connection to universal intelligence, with the tree serving as your router. Sometimes the knowing comes as a sudden shift in how you feel about your situation. Problems that seemed overwhelming suddenly feel manageable. Decisions that were causing anxiety suddenly feel obvious. Other times, you'll find yourself taking actions over the following days that you never would have considered before, but that lead you exactly where you need to go. This is dialogue of frequencies rather than words, a dance of vibrations between human and tree consciousness that represents the mental alchemy the ancient masters practiced. You're literally transforming doubt into certainty, confusion into clarity, illness into wellness, through the creative power of aligned imagination. The key is understanding that you're not separate from the intelligence that runs the universe. You're a focal point of that intelligence, temporarily focused in human form. When you align your imagination with natural forces through tree consciousness, you're remembering how to consciously participate in the creative process that's been running automatically your entire life. This is Thoth's secret revealed, not just communication with nature, but conscious collaboration with the creative forces that shape reality itself. Now we move beyond theory into something that might shock you with its concrete reality. These aren't feel-good stories or placebo effects we're talking about. What I'm about to share represents documented evidence that this ancient technique produces measurable transformations in people's everyday lives, results so tangible they force us to reconsider everything we think we know about problem-solving and human potential. The forest isn't just offering you peace and inspiration, it's providing access to intelligence fields that operate beyond the limitations of your individual thinking capacity. When you properly apply the technique Thoth encoded in those hieroglyphs, the one we explored in the last section, you're essentially plugging into a problem-solving network that has been processing information for thousands of years. Let me tell you about Sarah, a marketing executive from Portland who had battled chronic anxiety for over a decade. She'd exhausted every conventional approach: cognitive behavioral therapy, 3 different medications, meditation apps, yoga retreats, dietary changes, even hypnotherapy. Nothing provided lasting relief. Her anxiety would temporarily subside, only to return with the same crushing intensity that made simple decisions feel overwhelming. Then she learned about tree communication during a particularly dark period when she was considering taking extended medical leave. There was an ancient fig tree in a park near her apartment, massive, probably 200 years old, with roots that had witnessed the city grow up around it. Instead of approaching this tree with her usual mental chatter about anxiety symptoms, Sarah applied the projection technique, exactly as the ancient texts describe. She didn't ask the tree to remove her anxiety. That would have been focusing on the problem, which only reinforces problem consciousness. Instead, she projected the feeling of deep peace and safety, emotions she could barely remember experiencing, but could still access in her cellular memory. She held that feeling state while maintaining conscious connection with the fig tree's presence. What happened next wasn't gradual or subtle. Sarah described receiving what felt like a wave of tranquility that completely enveloped her consciousness. Not her thoughts, her consciousness itself. The feeling persisted for 3 full days, during which her anxiety symptoms were virtually non-existent. More importantly, something had shifted in her nervous system's baseline state. 6 months later, she reported that her anxiety levels had stabilized at the lowest point in over a decade, maintained through weekly sessions with her fig tree ally. Then there's Marcus, an entrepreneur whose restaurant business was facing bankruptcy after the pandemic decimated his customer base. He'd spent weeks analyzing spreadsheets, conducting emergency meetings with investors, exploring every conventional strategy his business mind could generate. Nothing was working. The numbers kept pointing toward inevitable closure. Desperate and mentally exhausted, Marcus remembered reading about tree communication in an old book his grandmother had given him. There was an oak tree in the park across from his restaurant, probably planted when the neighborhood was first developed. Feeling slightly ridiculous but out of options, he sat with his back against that oak and applied the technique. Instead of mentally rehearsing his business problems, which would only amplify problem frequency, Marcus projected the feeling of relief and clarity that would accompany having already solved everything. He focused on the emotional signature of resolution, rather than the details of how that resolution might manifest. Within 10 minutes, still sitting in connection with the oak's consciousness field, a completely unexpected strategy emerged in his mind. Not a variation on his previous thinking, something entirely outside his normal problem-solving patterns. The strategy involved partnering with local farms to create a community-supported agriculture pickup point at his restaurant, transforming his space into a neighborhood food hub rather than just a dining establishment. This approach had never occurred to him during weeks of conventional brainstorming. It required completely different revenue models, supplier relationships, and community engagement strategies. Yet the solution felt complete, clear, and immediately actionable. That oak-inspired pivot not only saved Marcus's business but increased his annual revenue by 40% within 18 months. These aren't isolated incidents. I've documented dozens of similar cases across completely different life domains. There's Elena, a painter who had been stuck in creative stagnation for 2 years until she began regular communication sessions with a grove of birch trees near her studio. The trees didn't give her specific artistic ideas. They shifted her consciousness into frequencies where entirely new creative possibilities became visible. Her art took directions she never could have imagined from her previous mental framework. Consider Janet, a single mother struggling with her teenage son's increasingly defiant behavior. Traditional parenting approaches were creating more conflict, not resolution. During regular evening walks where she would connect with a neighborhood maple tree, Janet began receiving insights about patience and wisdom that transformed her entire approach to parenting. The tree's perspective operated on longer timescales than human frustration, helping her see her son's behavior as natural developmental processes rather than personal challenges to her authority. Or David, a corporate executive whose 70-hour work weeks were destroying his marriage and his health. During forest walks where he practiced the projection technique with various trees, solutions for work-life balance began emerging that his stressed mind had been incapable of generating. These weren't time management tips. They were fundamental shifts in how he understood productivity and success that allowed him to reduce his work hours while actually increasing his professional effectiveness. Here's what makes these transformations so significant. They represent direct results of deliberately using consciousness to access intelligence fields beyond individual mental limitations. When you align your personal vibration with nature's frequency and focus your intention clearly, you step outside your own limited problem-solving mind and open yourself to infinite possibility fields. The forest becomes more than beautiful scenery. It transforms into mentor, counselor, endless inspiration source, and powerful ally for navigating life's complexities. Trees have been processing information, adapting to challenges, and finding creative solutions for millions of years. Their consciousness carries that accumulated wisdom, and the projection technique creates a bridge for accessing it. What's beautiful about this practice is that it requires no belief system or faith, only direct experience. Nature doesn't care about your skepticism or dogma. It responds to frequency and intention with the same reliability that gravity responds to mass. Through consistent practice, people build trust relationships with both the natural world and their own intuitive wisdom, learning to rely on inner guidance because they witness its practical results manifesting in daily life. The evidence is becoming undeniable. We're dealing with real internal technology that generates tangible changes when properly applied. This isn't positive thinking or wishful hoping. It's a systematic method for expanding your problem-solving capacity beyond the limitations of individual thinking. Once you've established genuine communication with forest consciousness through dedicated practice, something remarkable happens that most people never expect. The connection doesn't shut off when you leave the woods. That vibrational signature you've developed, that frequency of awareness you've learned to access, becomes a permanent part of your perceptual toolkit. The forest consciousness, having recognized your authentic presence, begins weaving its guidance into the fabric of your everyday life through an intricate language of symbols, synchronicities, and perfectly timed encounters. This isn't wishful thinking or confirmation bias. There's a fundamental shift in how reality organizes itself around you once you've opened this communication channel. The same intelligence that coordinates the growth patterns of entire ecosystems, that orchestrates the seasonal migrations of countless species, that maintains the delicate chemical balance of soil and atmosphere, begins using the elements of your daily environment as communication devices. Let me give you some concrete examples of how this plays out. You're walking through your neighborhood, wrestling with a major life decision that's been keeping you awake at night. Your mind is churning through possibilities, weighing pros and cons, feeling utterly lost. At the exact moment you think, I need a sign about which direction to take, a red-tailed hawk circles overhead 3 times before landing on a streetlight directly in front of you. It sits there for a full minute, looking straight at you, before flying due east. Later that day, you discover the opportunity you've been considering is located exactly in that eastern direction from your home. Or consider this scenario. You've been struggling with a relationship that feels stuck, wondering whether to fight for it or let it go. Walking to work, feeling heavy with doubt, you notice 2 oak trees growing so close together their root systems have completely intertwined. Their branches arch toward each other, creating a natural shelter. One tree clearly went through some trauma years ago, its trunk scarred and twisted, but the other tree's branches extend protectively around it, sharing resources, providing structural support. You realize you're looking at a living metaphor for the relationship choice you're facing. These aren't random coincidences. They're intentional communications from the expanded consciousness network you've joined through your forest practice. The intelligence that governs natural systems has recognized your willingness to listen and begins speaking through whatever elements are available in your immediate environment. The transformation in daily perception is profound. That potted plant on your windowsill stops being mere decoration and becomes a living ambassador of forest consciousness within your home. You start noticing how it responds to your emotional states, how its leaves turn toward you when you're speaking, how it seems to flourish when you're aligned with your authentic path, and droops when you're betraying your deeper knowing. The plant becomes a barometer for your spiritual alignment, a constant reminder of your connection to the larger web of life. Weather patterns take on new meaning. Rain on your face transforms from inconvenience into blessing and cleansing. You begin sensing the emotional quality of different storms, understanding when they're bringing clearing energy versus nourishing moisture versus the wild electricity of transformation. Wind becomes a messenger, carrying information about energetic shifts in your environment. Even urban elements like the way light filters through buildings or how shadows fall across your path begin speaking in coherent patterns. Perhaps the most significant shift is how this awareness dissolves the epidemic loneliness that characterizes modern society. How can you feel isolated when you realize you're in constant dialogue with everything around you? That crushing sense of separation that drives so much. Human suffering simply evaporates when you remember the language of connection that was always there, waiting for you to tune in. Your family extends far beyond human relationships. The old maple tree you pass on your commute becomes a grandfather offering daily wisdom about weathering life's storms with grace. The stray cat that appears whenever you're feeling overwhelmed becomes a teacher about maintaining independence while accepting support. The stone you picked up on a beach years ago, sitting on your desk, becomes an anchor connecting you to geological time and the patience of mountains. You understand at a cellular level that you belong to a vast, loving web of consciousness that sustains and communicates with you at every moment. The birds outside your window aren't just making noise, they're sharing information about the energetic quality of the day ahead. The flowers in your neighbor's garden aren't just pretty, they're broadcasting frequencies of joy and renewal that your nervous system can actually receive and integrate. But here's the deeper truth that Thoth understood. This technique was never really about talking to trees. That was just the entry point, the portal into remembering your true nature. The real purpose has always been awakening the arboreal consciousness within yourself, that part of your awareness that remembers its connection to Earth, understands life and death cycles naturally, knows how to sink deep roots while simultaneously reaching for light. You begin recognizing that you are no different from trees, made of the same essential elements, feeding on the same soil through the food you eat, breathing the same air in continuous mutual exchange with plant life. You are literally Earth's consciousness manifesting in human form, just as trees are Earth's consciousness manifesting in plant form. This remembrance feels like returning home after a long, confusing journey away from your true identity. The layers of social conditioning and limiting beliefs imposed since birth start dissolving naturally. You remember who you were before you learned to doubt your intuition, before you accepted the story that you're separate from nature, before you forgot that consciousness flows through all things. The awakened life isn't about gaining something new, it's about removing everything that was never authentically yours to begin with. Living this way transforms existence from a series of random events into coherent dialogue with loving intelligence that guides and supports your journey at every step. You stop feeling like you're struggling against an indifferent universe and start experiencing yourself as a beloved participant in an infinitely creative cosmic conversation. If this video resonated with you and awakened something you recognize as true, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."